Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Soberger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where the conversation's always going. You could always call into the show, too. We are live, so you could call in. Numbers in North America, 305-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265000151. And, of course, you didn't write those numbers down. I know you didn't write those numbers down. So you could, of course, get those numbers on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where, once again, we'll go the full circle. Once you go there, you could click on that chat room button and join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So imagine you spent your entire career, your entire life, calling for the destruction, for the genocide, and for the murder of the people who live around you. Imagine you spent your entire life funding terrorism against innocent people and encouraging the death and destruction of property. You spent your entire life propagating a myth that you know is a myth because you were there when the myth was created. You were there when it happened, when it started. You understand how fake the situation is, but you've enriched yourself all those years. You've gathered tons and tons of money, and you've put it away. You socked it away. You put it under your mattress. It's there for you. Imagine you're that person, and then suddenly you are stricken by the coronavirus. What do? Do you go to your own hospitals, the hospitals that are woefully unfunded? Or do you go to the hospitals that you were calling for the destruction of in the country that you refuse to recognize? Well, we'll find out, because that actually happened this week. My name is Howie Soberger. This is Political Hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Join me in the chat room, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Call in, numbers on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Soberger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to join in on the conversation. You can join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. And, of course, you could call into the show. The show is live. You could call in. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265000151. Before we get to the main story of the show, we have a little bit of breaking news. It's not really breaking, but it's kind of breaking-ish news. Now we know that the blood libel was started by the New York governor, the governor of New York, and the mayor of New York City, claiming that the Orthodox Jewish community of New York was spreading COVID, and they were being actually scapegoated as the only community that was spreading COVID in New York City. The governor of the state of New York had a press conference last week where he put up pictures of Orthodox Jews. He displayed pictures of Orthodox Jews praying. and said that these Orthodox Jews were responsible for not following COVID regulations, and they were responsible for the spread of COVID in New York City. Concurrently, right after that, not surprisingly, New York Jews were being attacked. So Jews walking down the street were being randomly attacked by people upset that it was New York Jews, that it was the Orthodox Jewish community that was spreading COVID around New York City. And the media started staking out synagogues, Orthodox Jewish synagogues, taking pictures of people going in, counting, doing head counts of people going in, and reporting breathlessly every night that the synagogue on 84th Street had 51 people when the maximum amount of people you're supposed to have was 50. And the Jews were being scapegoated, and the blood libel continued in New York. In an extremely strange twist of the story, and of course there's always a twist of the plot, in an extremely strange twist of the plot, in a briefing on Tuesday morning, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio revealed that he had held meetings with leaders of the Jewish community, and he expressed regrets for some of the previous actions and statements. In his Tuesday briefing, Mayor de Blasio revealed that he held an in-person meeting on Monday at Gracie Mansion, which is where he lives, that is the mayor's mansion in New York. He aimed at building a strategy to curb the spread of COVID-19 in predominantly Jewish areas of Brooklyn and Queens. Here's a quote. It was a very moving meeting, a very productive meeting with a group of leaders from Brooklyn and Queens, some of whom I've known very well for as much as 20 years, and a very honest meeting, the mayor told the insiders Jacob Kornbluth during his City Hall briefing. I think that what the meeting really helped me with was to appreciate that so many people in the community have suffered, and they need to know that we as the city government understand their suffering, understand the difficulties that the community has gone through, understand the fears that people have rightfully of discrimination, and that we need each other to hear more of each other and to understand each other more. The mayor then expressed that he had regrets about his role in raising tensions between the city's state officials and members of the Orthodox Jewish community due to harsh measures taken. This is his quote where he apologizes. I look back now and understand that there was just more dialogue that was needed, said the mayor. I certainly got very frustrated at times when I saw large groups of people still without masks, but I think more dialogue would have been better. So I certainly want to express my regret that I didn't figure out how to do that better. Well, so the mayor apologized. The governor still has not apologized to the Jewish community for pointing a blood libel at them. But the mayor has apologized. So I guess that's a step in the right direction. I'm hoping that the governor, Andrew Cuomo, decides that it is appropriate for him to apologize to the Jewish community for scapegoating them. Scapegoating Jews should never be acceptable, ever. We should never accept the scapegoating of Jews. Never. In any situation. Sure, I'm not saying that all the Jewish communities always do everything 100% the way they're supposed to be done, but that is no excuse to scapegoat the Jewish community. We should be outraged every time it happens, and we should speak up and force politicians to apologize and lower the tension so that Jews do not get attacked, as they have been in New York City since the government of New York pointed their finger at the Orthodox Jewish community. We should not allow the media to get away with stalking and staking out in front of synagogues to count heads to see how many people have gone into the synagogue. It is totally unacceptable, totally unacceptable behavior that should be condemned from coast to coast, should be condemned by everybody. I didn't hear very many condemnations. The Jewish community, especially the secular Jewish community, was extremely quiet when it came to this topic. They didn't really condemn it. They didn't really say much about it. But it really should be condemned from sea to shining sea. It is unacceptable behavior by a government, and it's unacceptable. The Jewish community should not accept being scapegoated by anyone. We should not accept blood libels. Not before, not now, not ever. Howie Saeb, this is Political Hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to call in. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265000151. You can join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where the conversation has started and is always interesting in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I have a huge issue with Jews being scapegoated, and it happens all the time. And we usually sit back and we say, okay, that's not really what he meant. And we tend to rationalize because we don't want to believe. We don't want to believe that there are governments in the world, there are people in the world who still hate Jews. The Jews of North America, the Jews of Europe, the Jews living in the diaspora, feel so comfortable living where they live that they don't want to imagine that their governments don't like them. They don't want to imagine that their neighbors don't like them. It's kind of I'm not going to compare it to pre-Nazi Germany, but we have to understand that pre-Nazi Germany, the Jews living in Germany, felt also that they were more German than they were Jewish. In fact, a lot of them that were very, very, very well respected in society were very surprised when they were rounded up and sent to Auschwitz. They were extremely surprised when they were sent to Dachau. And the reason they were surprised was, and the way they expressed it was simply, I don't understand why I'm being collected now. You're collecting Jews. I'm more German than I'm Jewish. Why are you coming after me? At the end of the day, we have to understand, religious, non-religious, Orthodox, non-Orthodox, we're all Jewish. And at the end of the day, the comfort that Jews feel living in the diaspora, the peaceful comfort that they feel, the affluence that Jews have living in the diaspora, is all a false sense of security. As we could see, when the going gets tough and people start dying and the disease is spreading throughout the land, the first people pointed to are the Jews. Now, do you think that the Hasidic Jewish community in New York were the only community that were violating New York's COVID regulations? I know they're not the only community that was violating COVID regulations. I know that 100%. So why is it that the governor of New York chose to put the pictures of Orthodox Jews chose to display pictures of Orthodox Jews during his press conference? He didn't display Muslims who were also violating COVID regulations when they went to their mosques. He didn't display Christians. He didn't go after BLM activists who were in the streets, thousands and thousands, no masks, standing shoulder to shoulder. He didn't condemn Antifa, who have been rioting and destroying neighborhoods with no masks. Hundreds of them running around together in the middle of the street. Those people weren't condemned. He only pointed at the Jews. And this is a good warning sign. This is a blinking red light, a flashing red light that Jews have to start being careful. That Jews have to really be careful. Now, we've always had to be careful, but now we have to really watch out, because once you're scapegoated once by the government, and for something relatively minor, well, not so minor, but relatively minor when it comes to scapegoating, the more major scapegoating could come in the near future. Bill de Blasio apologized to the Jewish community today, and good on him for apologizing. I'm not a big fan of Bill de Blasio, but good on him for apologizing. At least he had the guts to get up and say I was wrong. But the governor hasn't apologized, and who knows what's going to happen next when the next crisis hits New York City, and they need somebody to point fingers at. They're not going to point fingers at themselves and say, we failed as a government to protect the New Yorkers. They're going to point fingers at the Jews again and say, look at these Jews. They're not following the rules. And that's where the scary situation comes in. And that's where Jews really have to watch out for themselves. So, once again, I want to congratulate Bill de Blasio for doing what he did, for apologizing, but it might be too little, too late. I'm Howie Silberger. Coming up, we're going to talk about the terrorist leader who decided that he has to go to his terror victims for medical treatment. That's coming up right after the break. Join me in the chat room, IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. where the conversation's always going. It's always great to be in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. You could call into the show in North America. The number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265-00151. This is Israel News Talk Radio. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Political Hitman.
I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Thank you for joining me. Join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where the conversation's always going and always interesting. You could call into the show in North America. The number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265-00151. And those numbers are, of course, available on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So imagine you spent your entire career, pushing a false narrative that the country you live in is not a real country, is an illegitimate country, that the land that the people who are living in the country was stolen from you, that the only solution to the situation is the destruction of the country and the annihilation and genocide of the people. Imagine you spent your entire life doing that. And then you spent your entire life promoting terror against these people, helping organize attacks against them, being responsible for the murder of many and many of these people. And you're around at the beginning of this whole situation, so you know that it's all predicated on a lie, that it's all predicated on a conspiracy theory. And then you get sick. So what do? Do you go to your poorly funded hospitals in your areas because you stole the money that was supposed to go to the hospitals? You and your colleagues stole the money? So do you go to the poorly funded hospitals in your area where you're almost guaranteed to die? The hospitals that you force your citizenship to go to because you want them to die because it's a good political point that the hospitals aren't working properly? Or do you go to your enemy, the enemy that you've been trying to kill, the enemy that you've been promoting genocide, the enemy that you called an apartheid state, the enemy that you said were committing genocide against your people, the enemy that you called for the boycott of? Do you go to their hospital and get treatment there where you're almost guaranteed to at least get the best treatment possible? You might still die, but you'll get the best treatment possible. What do? The quandary, the horrible, horrible quandary. Well, it was no quandary for Palestinian Liberation Organization Secretary General Saeb Erekat, because he remains in critical but stable condition at Hadassah and Kerem Hospital in Israel. Erekat was rushed to the hospital on Sunday following a deterioration in his condition after he contracted COVID-19. Mr. Erekat, which has been hospitalized at Hadassah Medical Center, was connected to an ECMO machine. He's on a ventilator. a spokesman at the hospital said. This was done to support his lung function. Using the machine allows the blood to be oxygenated while allowing the lungs to rest and avoid ventilator-assisted lung injury, particularly of the transplanted lung, which he got transplanted in an Israeli hospital. Now, his care continues to be coordinated with lung transplant specialists in Israel and abroad to provide optimum quality care to this patient with complications of COVID-19 infection on the background of a previous lung transplant, the spokesman added. Now, Erekat is in a high-risk group after having previously contracted pulmonary fibrosis and having undergone a lung transplant with Israeli doctors in the United States in 2017. Now, a frequent critic of Israel, Erekat has in the past accused Israel of war crimes, massacres, and genocide. In 2013, Erekat accused Israel of applying a policy of apartheid in Judea, Samaria, and eastern Jerusalem. Despite his accusation of Israeli genocide, this is not the first time that he has sought treatment in an Israeli hospital. In 2017, Erekat was spotted at the Blasio hospital in Petah Tikva. So, this is the hypocrisy of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. But it's not really a hypocrisy because Saeb Erekat was there at the beginning. He was there at the beginning of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. He was there at the founding and the creation of the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the people who call themselves Palestinian. He was there when they were created, way back in 1964. He was present and accounted for at the meetings when they were created as a pawn in political diplomacy, when they were created to cause destruction and strife in Israeli society and destroy Israel in a way from the inside out, because the Arab countries couldn't destroy the Israel from the outside in. He was there for it all. So Erekat realizes how much of a lie, he understands how much of a lie his entire narrative and his entire life has been. And when his life was in danger, when COVID-19 got him and his life was in danger, naturally, he went to the country with the healthcare system that's well-funded, rather than his hospitals, which he stole the funding from. Amazing, the hypocrisy. And amazing that people follow and people support the lies that Saeb Erekat has perpetrated over the years. Now, aside from being the Palestinian Liberation Organization's Secretary General, Saeb Erekat was also hired recently, as we reported a couple of weeks ago. He was hired recently as a lecturer at Harvard University. He was supposed to lecture this entire semester, teaching the minds of the Ivy League University, teaching diplomacy at the Ivy League University. A man who calls Israel a genocidal state, who commits to boycotting Israel, who refuses to attend negotiations for peace, who refuses to even recognize the state of Israel as a legitimate state, who is currently lying in the State of Israel hospital, was going to lecture at Harvard University, a United States Ivy League university, on diplomacy. Well, it looks like Harvard is going to have to find another terrorist to do that. And it's quite a shame for Harvard University because I'm sure they were looking forward to Saeb Erekat teaching the next generation of diplomats that Israel's an evil, genocidal, murderous state. So I'm sure it's hard. It's very difficult for Harvard University. So they're gonna have to find another terror leader. Well, there's a couple of them out there. I mean, you could go to Hezbollah, you could go to Hamas. I mean, they have leadership. You could choose any one of those leaders, the genocidal maniacs who want to go and kill Jews. They could hire him to lecture on diplomacy, because that's who you want teaching the young. That's really who you want standing in front of a classroom full of students and teaching them how to negotiate peace. Because Saeb Erekat was always successful in that. It is a strange, crazy world we live in. But once we realize that a lot of it is extremely hypocritical, once we realize that a lot of it is smoke and mirrors, it is political rhetoric with no backing to it whatsoever. Once we realize and see through the lies, and that's the problem many people have, they don't see through the lies. But once we see through the lies and we understand that a rhetoric is false, that the narrative is made up, it's fabricated narrative, and that the marketing is great. The Arabs always had good marketing, much better marketing than the Israelis ever had. They were much more capable of marketing their story than almost any other people, I'm sorry, I called them a people. I didn't mean to do that. They're much better at marketing their story, much better than many other organizations have been able to market their stories. The Palestinian Liberation Organization is probably the most successful fake organization for a fake people in the history of modern times. It is quite fascinating how they have managed to convince millions and millions of people that their story is true, that their story is legitimate, and that their cause is just. It's not, and we know it's not. And anyone who studies any history knows it's not. And so it's absolutely fascinating and totally mind-blowing that there are intelligent people out there who still argue that the Jews are not the indigenous people of Judea Samaria, even though the place is called Judea. It's mind-blowing that there are still people out there arguing that Israel should be dismantled and the Jews should go back to where they came from. It's funny. When the Jews were living in Europe in the 1940s and 50s, they were told to go back to where they came from, and where they came from was Israel. The Jews living in Israel are being told by the Arabs to go back to where they came from. Well, where is that? Jews came from Israel. It is a fact. The Jews are the indigenous people of the state of Israel, of the land of Israel. Not even the state of Israel. They're the indigenous people of the land of Israel. Jewish land extends far beyond the borders of where Israel currently is. But we'll accept the land for what we have. I wish Saeb Erekat a speedy recovery only because we're not supposed to wish death upon our enemies. But I do hope that when he recovers, he's unable to speak. Because the lies that he spews and the falsehoods that come off his tongue should be punished in one way or another. I'm Howie Silberger. We'll be back in a little while. You can call in 301-768-4841 in North America and Israel, 0265-00151. You could join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Soberger. This is Political Hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. You could join in the conversation in the chat room by going to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com and clicking on that chat room button. We are there in the chat room. We're there the entire show. You could feel free. You could call into the show. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265-00151. Don't worry if you didn't write those numbers down. They are on the top of the page on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So we're just about 2 weeks now, a little less, maybe 2 weeks. I think it's exactly 2 weeks, till a presidential election in the United States of America. There are two candidates running for president. Well, two major candidates. One is Donald Trump. The other one is Joe Biden. Donald Trump is the incumbent. Those of you who don't know about politics and might not have heard about Donald Trump, which I would find very surprising. He is the current president of the United States. He's running for re-election. Joe Biden is the challenger. He was a senator for 47 years, and he is running for president for the Democratic Party. And this week, the New York Post, the largest newspaper in the United States of America, largest circulation newspaper in the United States of America, released an expose detailing emails that were found on a laptop that was given in for repairs in a repair shop in Delaware. The laptop was given in to the repair shop by presidential candidate Joe Biden's son, Hunter. Now, in the emails, Hunter gave him the laptop to be repaired and never picked it up. After a certain amount of time, when you don't pick up something at these repair shops, the ownership of the item reverts to the repair shop. So Hunter Biden didn't pick up his laptop, and the laptop became the property of the repair shop. The repair shop, of course, went in, and they started cleaning it out, and they found a trove of pictures. They found a trove of emails, and some of those emails implicate candidate Joe Biden. When he was vice president with Barack Obama, they implicate Joe Biden in a corruption scandal. And now that the emails, the Biden campaign, by the way, has never denied that this is a real laptop and that the emails are real. They haven't denied the veracity of the emails. Nobody has denied the veracity of the emails. They came up with some excuse that it's Russian disinformation. They came up with excuses that the email was the emails were stolen. That it was stolen information. But nobody's actually challenged the veracity of it. Nobody's actually challenged the legitimacy of it. So we are to assume that the emails are legitimate, and there are a couple of news sources that have said that they have verified that the emails are legitimate. And Joe Biden was implicated in corruption with Ukraine, corruption with Russia. That his son was taking money for meetings with Joe Biden when he was vice president, which may have caused a change in foreign policy for certain countries. So, anyway, that's okay. So that's the background to the story. The big story was, though, aside from the corruption scandal was that none of the media wanted to cover it because it made Joe Biden look bad, and he was running against Donald Trump, and the media hates Donald Trump. Even worse than that is that the social media companies, Facebook, Twitter, the two major social media companies, decided to throttle the story. They were not going to allow the story to be shared or published on their platforms. Which means that millions of people who don't get the New York Post, who don't live in New York and don't subscribe to the New York Post, would not see the article or articles, the series of articles about these emails. Now, they said that they were doing this because they don't believe in publishing emails from sources that were stolen or hacked. This was their excuse. They didn't want to. They don't promote information from stolen or hacked sources, which was extremely interesting. The New York Times also, when asked why they didn't cover the story, and they haven't touched the story at all, said that they don't peddle in this kind of stuff either. So if the information that's being distributed was stolen or stolen from somebody else's laptop, or it was hacked, they are not going to they're not going to cover the story, and that's okay, I guess. I mean, it kind of flies in the face of journalism, but everybody makes their own editorial decision. But it surprised me. It surprised me after they made that statement. And New York Times is not known for being a straight newspaper anymore. In the right after the 2016 election, New York Times had to issue an apology for being biased against Donald Trump. So we know that the New York Times isn't what it used to be, which was the newspaper of record. It's no longer that. It's now a partisan hack paper, but that's fine. But not a day after the New York Times said we're not touching the Biden story because we don't peddle in stories from stolen information. They published an article about President Donald Trump's tax records. In fact, just yesterday they published an article saying that Donald Trump's tax records show that Trump maintains Chinese bank accounts. Now, I know, you know, and anybody who follows politics knows that Donald Trump never released his tax records. He has claimed since the beginning of his presidency that he's currently under audit and he would release his tax records at the end of the audit. So he has not released his tax records. There were tax records that were stolen from one of his accountants a couple of months ago, and ended up in the paper on the front page of the New York Times. They weren't full tax returns; they were just summaries of tax returns, and these are the papers that are being used to publish these stories. So this has to be a little concerning to anybody who cares about freedom of the press and freedom of information and the dispensing of information. When a newspaper tells you that they're not going to trade in illegitimate sourced material when it comes to one presidential candidate, and then trades in illegitimately sourced material when it comes to a second presidential candidate, when the media lines up with the social media companies behind one candidate over another candidate, then you are no longer living in a democracy. A democracy is freedom to vote freely, without any pressure, and a free media. When the media is no longer a free media, because once they turn and they favor a political candidate, then that political candidate owns the media owes the political candidate, everybody owes each other. Suddenly they're no longer a free media. So once you take the freedom of press out of a country, and the press aligns itself with the government, you no longer have a free country. Democracy has ended. Now the government could dictate what the newspapers say. The government could dictate what is news and what is not news. And the government is in charge of the information that the people get. Sound familiar? Well, it should. Communist Russia worked that way, Pravda. The Communist Russia worked that way. Communist Cuba worked that way. Communist China works that way. Communist North Korea works that way. It is the way of the dictatorships. The left-wing dictatorships all work that way. So it is no surprise that the media has aligned with Joe Biden. It is no surprise that Joe Biden has supported bringing in socialism, a radical form of socialism, into the United States. And this should be very concerning to any American listening, any American paying attention to what's going on. You should be afraid, very afraid. if Joe Biden wins and he controls the media, then the entire nature of a free and democratic society with a free press that scrutinizes the government's actions and scrutinizes politicians and vets presidential candidates before they get elected has disappeared forever. America will descend into a dictatorship, if not under the reign of Joe Biden. They will descend into a dictatorship within the next 2 or 3 presidents after that. It is a scary proposition. Remember the rule, and this rule is actually true, because you can look back and you'll see it's true. The Democrats have accused Donald Trump of trying to be a dictator. Anything they accuse Donald Trump of is something they are doing themselves. Last week, Nancy Pelosi pushed forward to create a council in Congress to decide if the president is fit to sit for office, and she made it very clear this is not about Donald Trump. So, if it's not about Donald Trump, then it's about Joe Biden. Joe Biden is 78 years old. If he gets elected, then Congress is planning, at least the Democratic Congress is planning, to declare him unfit to sit for office and to put in his vice president as president. She's a radical left-wing socialist, and the fall of America will begin. It's a sad, scary situation. That's what it is. I'm Howie Silvergren. This is Political Hitman. I'll see you again next week right here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.